Well, good morning to everyone, and first of all, I want to say thank you to Andrew and to the Australian Hereford Association for inviting me to be a part of your convention. It's been a fantastic 3 days. I really enjoyed the sessions, and David Johnson and I had a little talk here right before I'm getting started. He asked what was going on in the U.S., and honestly, we're faced with many of the very same challenges and thoughts and ideas that each of you are. We're kind of going down some of the parallel roads, if you will, a little bit, and so it's good. This is a great convention. I've enjoyed every bit of it. As always, some of the best conversations or best thoughts at any convention happens in the hallway, and I've enjoyed those opportunities to speak to many of you individually. So when Andrew called me this last winter, our winter, and asked if I could be a part of it, I was very honored to even be asked. I don't look at what we've accomplished at the American Hereford Association, as you'll find, is anything to do specifically with Jack Ward. It's about what we refer to as Team Hereford. It's a collective group effort of some of the things that we've done, and so but I'm happy to come and share with you some of the things that we have implemented, and so that's what I'm going to do. So what you have to remember at the very beginning of this is that this is what we've done in the United States, right? These are some of the things, the challenges that we had, some of the ways that we kind of hopped over some of the hurdles that we had, and so this is what we've done, and I think if you can get a couple of ideas of some of the things that we've done and kind of implement them here in your country, then my trip has been a success. Oh, all right, hit the slide, but this slide here is just to make a quick introduction. As Andrew said, I am the current Executive Vice President of the American Hereford Association. I've been with the Hereford Association since the American Hereford Association since 2003, and prior to that, I made my living doing exactly what you guys are doing, raising cattle. I was a seed stock producer, and lo and behold, I was actually an Angus guy. And but it was my opportunity, called by Craig Huffines, to come and get involved with an association that I have a lot of respect for. And just so you all know, my two sons are actually graduated now from college, but the four of us still maintain a herd of registered Angus and Hereford cows. So again, I like to tell people that I think it's important that I stay involved in the trials and tribulations that each one of you have. It's very interesting when we implemented some changes to our software program at the American Hereford Association. We actually have many of our staff members that have Hereford cattle and use Hereford cattle, but we use the system ourselves to try it out. It's things that we can do and see prior to releasing that I think is really, really important. And so just a bit of a background about me. I grew up in the middle of agriculture area in Indiana. I'm a graduate of Purdue University, and I had 7 brothers and sisters. And so I was the next youngest in our family. And quite frankly, our family, my dad was a farmer, raised cattle, we had pigs, we had sheep, and it was one of those times in the U.S. as when I was a kid that you had to be very diversified so that when one commodity price was poor, the other one was good, just so that we could survive. And so over time, my older brothers ventured out to the tractors and the field work, and so myself and my younger sister were kind of the ones left behind to take care of the livestock chores. And so my love affair with livestock, seed stock business grew from the very beginning, and that gives you a little bit of my background. I want to tell you just a little bit, because I was very interested last night, veterinarian and the gentleman from MLA today. I have 2 sons that are very involved in what we do. One, my youngest son, is actually back at the farm now, but my oldest son is living in New York City. And he's got a degree in theater and drama, and he's an aspiring actor. Where the hell he got that, I have no idea. But that's what he wanted to do, and that's what he's doing. And the interesting thing about Cameron, my oldest son, is that when I talk to him, he shares with me some of the same thoughts that were brought about. He said, Dad, You have no idea what my friends in New York City think about agriculture, right? When they're off to the bars or the pubs or whatever, and they sit around and have conversations. But the key with Cameron is, because of his background and what he did at our farm, he's our voice. And he's not afraid to share with him what we truly do, what it means, and I think it's a good opportunity. And we'll talk about that a little bit moving forward, because one of the biggest assets that we have in the United States of whatever breed association you're associated with are our junior programs. And at the American Hereford Association, we actually have over 4,000 now, or just right around 4,000 junior members. And even though we know not many of those are going to come back into direct cattle production and raise registered Hereford cattle, they're going to be our spokespeople moving forward. So we have to continue to support them. I want to compliment the association for their gathering of the young guns. I spoke to them here a couple days ago, and I'm going to apologize to them right now because I didn't change my slides. You're going to have to hear the same thing over and over here a little bit. But what's the old saying? If you have a consistent and the same message over and over and over, finally it'll sink in. So that's where we are on just a little bit of my background. So what I want to talk to you a little bit over the next few minutes is the impacts of crossbreeding. A little bit about what we've done in terms of research and crossbreeding, which, as we heard yesterday, won't be very different than what you've seen or heard yesterday. I want to talk to you about our National Reference SIRE program and what it's done. You heard Rob and David talk about reference populations yesterday. Our Young SIRE test program is kind of our version of a reference population. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the opportunities I think we have moving forward, and honestly some of the challenges. But what I wanted to start with, and you'll see this as we get into this presentation, is how in the world did the Executive Vice President of the American Hereford Association put his first slide up here and there's not a Hereford on it, right? That's a challenge. And that was a challenge for our board to get their arms around, and our members, as we set back and set sail on these programs. But what you're going to find out is this is the key that has created demand and interest back in Hereford cattle in the United States. There we go. So this is no different. You've already seen a lot of these slides over the last couple days, so a lot of it's just going to be review. But we'll talk a little bit about what heterosis does in the beef cattle industry, and obviously the impact of crossbreeding really has the biggest effect on lowly heritable traits: fertility, longevity, health, efficiency. And I will tell you, and again, you have scientists in this room that would tell you better than I do. And by the way, I want to tell you something about my background. I am not a PhD. I don't have a degree in genetics. As a matter of fact, I'm an economist by trade, and that's what I studied. So most of the time, I can tell you that whether you're a geneticist or an economist, we all have the same bottom line. I think David Robb put up there, profitability. So in my lifetime, when marginal costs are higher than marginal revenue, or my economic background kicks in, I got a problem. My revenue's got to be higher than my cost. And so my thoughts and the way I approach it may be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, we all have the same idea at the end, and that's creating profitability for our members and our customers. Again, you'll have small net effect, positive effects across many traits, and at the end of the day, you have a large cumulative effect. And so I had this conversation with someone yesterday when we got the report of the first year or two of your crossbreeding project here in Australia, and they said, boy, we'd like to see more spread in some of that information. It isn't going to happen, right? I'm just here to tell you, it's small net positive effects that add up, and it creates profitability for your particular customers. So why I think back, and I'll tell you again a little bit of where I started in 2003. The American Hereford Association was seeing declines in registrations, revenue, membership. The breed had somewhat of a black eye on some that were perceived problems and some that were really truly problems. And so when I set sail in my job in 2003, my very first board meeting, I was in there and we have 12 board members, and they looked at me and they said, what are you going to do to make and change the direction of the industry for Hereford in the United States, and now put a Hereford cow back in every commercial pasture? And I looked at them very quickly, and again, you got to remember I was newly hired, but one thing about it, I do like my opinion, and I have some resources behind my opinion. And I told them we shouldn't be worried about changing every commercial cow back to a Hereford cow. What we need to do is take advantage of the situation we've got, and every black commercial cow in the United States should see a Hereford bull. That's where we need to focus. That's what we got to do, because there's opportunities there, and over the course of time, heterosis had been ignored in the U.S. Commercial cow herd. And what is it? We all believe the purebreds are better. It's a common thread, a common theme. It doesn't matter whether you're a breed association rep. I know Fernando, and we had this conversation quite a bit, I do, in South America. And I get it. You're very loyal to a breed, and because they're a little more pure, or they are, we feel as though they're better. So we had to cross that path just a little bit. Over the years in the United States, we have focused solely on single traits, and I can go right down through the litany of things. It was frame and size and growth back to the 70s and 80s. Then we had a real time with birth weight, calving ease. We single traded that to death. We had growth. Now we've got growth in another way in terms of these big spread bulls with yearling growth, weaning growth. And now we're on this incline of talking simply about carcass. And yesterday you folks were touched on it. You're touched the same way we are. Is it all about marbling, right? We all want a high quality product, but when you go to the packer or even to the feed yard supplier, when we talk to them, it's still about pounds and yield. Now, obviously, we want to make it as high quality as we possibly can, but a packer really sells pounds, and a feedlot grows and sells feed, and so they need to have some yield and performance in those cattle. So we do some of those things, and David and I thought Rob, they did such a wonderful job, because I'm telling you, I had to get my arms around this one as well. The good old coffee shop talk about how fast my calves grew, how big they were, was so important over time that we forgot to measure how much is it costing us to do that. So we really never focused on the input portion of this, and again, it's about profitability. Again, marginal costs are bigger than marginal revenue. You're in trouble, right? You may have the most beautiful looking set of feeder calves at the sale barn that top the sale by 10 cents. Does that make them the most profitable? I could argue with you, absolutely not, right? And so we have to get our arms around measuring these inputs. Uniformity and qualitative traits, or coat color. It sounds like a little bit of you are faced with this, and I told the young guns the other day, as I was in my program back in Indiana selling Angus bulls in a farming community, I really had no trouble, because in through the 70s and 80s, crossbreeding, the way it was done, was not managed properly. We had kind of mongrelized the cow herd. There were different colors, shapes, and types, and they could come to me and buy an Angus bull, and in one generation, they could get their calf crop looking the same, at least from a coat color standpoint. So that uniformity of coat color, and one of the challenges that we have with Hereford and their effect was one of the things that we got to get over. And then heterosis is very difficult to visualize and even measure. I mean, you guys seen that yesterday, right? Even in a structured test, sometimes it's really hard to see what that impact was. Beef is, and the belief is also complicated to implement, because we like that some of our breeders, when we go into the commercial industry, in the U.S. and talk to them, they tell us that crossbreeding is just too complicated. We don't have the time, the resources, the pastures, the space to do some of these things, and so we have to jump over that hurdle. And we want, at times over the years, we wanted to modify the environment to the cattle, and again, that's creep feeding, adding some of those things, and trying to make the cattle fit into an environment where it's not good. And here's the one that we have to maybe get our hands around the most, and that is historic active resistance by seed stock producers and breed associations to accept crossbreeding as good, right? So I enjoyed my trip out to Yarram Park the other day, and I was talking to Jeremy about this a little bit. His neighbor has some Angus cattle and bulls, and he's a competitor with him, obviously, in marketing the cattle. But what we have to get our arms around is it's okay if my customer decides he needs to go buy an Angus bull. It's okay, right? Because at some point in time, he needs to continue crossbreeding, and he's going to come back and get a Hereford bull from you. Because it's better for the industry. And so we have to get our arms around that. And again, that's a very difficult thing for breed associations, and especially from an exec who gets his paycheck from Hereford breeders, to stand up on this stump and tell you that. But it's important to realize that we're all in this together, and again, if we really believe in crossbreeding, then we have to believe it's okay for one of our customers to go buy an alternate breed bull. Industry and universities have focused on improving individual traits, as we talked about that for years, and again, this is in the United States. I'm not telling you, David, that you've focused on that in our group or the universities have, but we have done that. Right, and we still do that in the United States. And one of the killers, in my opinion, is calving ease. We have university extension that goes out and tells cow-calf guys that they've got to use a Hereford or an Angus bull that's in the top 10% of the breed for calving ease on their cows. That's a bad message, right? Because in my opinion, if your cow can't have at least, 7-8% of its body weight to calve unassisted, then you're in a problem, okay? Heifer bulls, absolutely. You want to use whatever you can to cut down on the number of calf pulls, and I get that. But when we began to kind of focus single trait on things without any kind of thought process to what that does to our cow herd, because I tell you, one of the things that selecting only for calving ease, even in your cow herd, that over time, your maternal calving ease is going to go down too, right? So there's always an antagonism associated with it. So what we create is these bunch of little narrow females that have trouble calving, not because of the bull, but because what we've created in the female side. And then this picture is just kind of a little fun because the inappropriate use of breed diversity. We chose the wrong breeds to complement our cows and our environment. In our country, Brahma cattle probably don't need to be used in Montana. And so we just need to make sure that we're using the right combination of genetics for our environment. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the various projects that we've been involved with over the past few years. And I put this little picture up here, and we'll actually talk about Randall just a little bit more, but he was a part of our national advertising campaign. And Randall Raymond is the head research guy at Simplot Ranch in Idaho, where they run 30,000 cows. And Randall came to us about 10 years ago and said, we've got a problem. We're losing heterosis in our females, and especially in our first calf females, because we think we have to breed every heifer to a black bull. And so we've lost some heterosis there. And so his comment was, he said, I need it all. I need it all for my ranch or farm to be profitable. And so we'll touch on a little more about Randall, but I think that's an interesting picture. We're very involved in anything to do with research. You folks were kind of challenged a little bit yesterday by Rob and David. We heard from the MLA representative today. And whenever something's going on in the area of research, in the United States, we feel like the American Hereford Association needs to be involved. So the initial project in terms of genomics was the 2000 bull project that was done at the Meat Animal Research Center. Over the years, the fertility project, Jerry Taylor, Matt Spangler, feed efficiency, Dorian's been a part of a lot of these. We got a hair shedding project going on now with the University of Missouri. Jared Deckard is kind of managing that. And then obviously some of the areas, some of the work that's been done in sequencing. We've actually now got, I think, around 20 or 25 high accuracy influence Hereford bulls sequenced. We'll start with the 2000 bull project. It was a cumulative effort by many of the breed associations along with the science community. And this was kind of our first step or our first leap into genomics and genotyping animals. And it was about 2,000 sires that they wanted done. It actually grew way bigger than that, I think, over time. But the meat animal research with some funding by the government allowed us to get some bulls genotyped and kind of got us started in this direction. What came from that project initially was some very interesting information, in my opinion, and this little graph just shows what the relationship is amongst the breeds that were genotyped. And one thing you got to remember about heterosis and hybrid vigor is that the biggest bump in hybrid vigor and heterosis that you get is when you actually mate two breeds that are most dissimilar. And these two lines up here where HL and HH are actually the relationship of Hereford, and beyond Brahma, this BR down here, we were more unrelated to any other breed in the US. So again, that made us start to think about our opportunity in terms of crossbreeding. Somebody asked the other day, and I want to make clear, the HL is line 1. So there was another kind of a special project going on with Mike McNeil at Miles City, the research center, and so he sent in a lot of DNA work on some Miles City bulls, so you can see even the Miles City bulls were a little even more unrelated than others. So we began to think about what we wanted to do in terms of implementing some of these projects, and this slide here is just a little bit entertaining because let's face it, when you're headed into a meeting with a large customer, commercial bull customer, a big cow-calf guy, they don't have a lot of time for you. So you kind of got to give your spiel in a short period of time. You got to tell them what your breed has to offer, what your membership has to offer, so that you can get into those programs. These are some of the programs that we've been in over the last 15 years. Circle A Ranch, you seen a slide yesterday. They really are a huge straight Angus program. They actually had a purebred herd. They recently dispersed, but they run about 10,000 commercial cows, predominantly Angus. Harris Ranch, you've seen some of the information there. We called it the Harris Ranch Project, but the work was actually done at Mark and John Lacey's herd, which is just a member of the Harris Ranch. Amana Farms is a big commercial cow herd in Iowa. Simplot Ranch, I just talked about 30,000 head of cows in Idaho and the surrounding states. Staley Ranch, a big commercial herd in South Dakota. Bruce Mershron is one of our newest members to our young sire test herds. He and his wife run about 2,000 cows right around Kansas City there. Sandrock Ranch is in Wisconsin, and Olson Ranch is in western Nebraska. The main reason I wanted to share this slide with you is to tell you we've gone and we haven't been satisfied by picking one particular region of the country. We wanted to make sure we had some representation in different herds from different parts of the U.S. So I'll start with the Circle A Ranch and what we did there. It's interesting. I told the young guns the other day a little bit about my life and my story growing up and my belief about how you never know who's watching you or paying attention to you. So it's very, very important to always be at your best. But at any rate, Circle A Ranch was managed, and their head cow guy were actually good friends of mine. Over the years, we had done a lot of things in the Angus side, and we were sitting at a show. at our Missouri State Fair, I will tell you that we were actually drinking a beer and enjoying ourselves, and we got to talking, and I asked them, I said, hey guys, have you ever thought about crossbreeding? Because Circle A was the Big Angus program that teamed up with ABS many, many years ago to start. They were the first to start measuring feed intake and feed efficiency in cattle in the United States on a big level. And so we were sitting there, and they kind of looked at each other kind of funny, and I thought, you know, they're probably going to tell me I'm crazy. And I will tell you that over my life, now almost 56 years, one thing that I've learned as I've grown a little older, the worst anybody can tell you is to go to hell, right? You're done. No, I don't want to do that. You can go on, but you can offer it to them. We talked about it. They said we actually have, and we thought about maybe even implementing some simmental into our program for our feed yard. They retained ownership, sold the cattle, did everything like that. They said, let us think about it. So about a month later, they came back, and we set up the very first program. We just took a sampling of cattle at their ranch. They had actually 3 ranches, so we randomly mated 600 cows to Hereford bulls. The balance of their cows around them were mated to Angus bulls. A lot of AI work here. And we implemented the little start of this project. And we measured traits of economic importance, calving ease, weaning weight, yearling weight, feedlot gain, feed efficiency, and fertility of the F1 females. We wanted to make sure somebody talked about this yesterday. What was the comparison of bulls from the Hereford side as opposed to the Angus side? And we, in any of these projects, I was telling David earlier, whether it's these research or test herds, we let the test herds determine the Hereford bulls they want to use. Okay, so this was their selection. This is what they wanted. The Angus sires were in the top 30% for birth and weaning, and top 20% for weaning, and so the comparison here was pretty high accuracy, good Angus bulls to some pretty good Hereford bulls as well. The results are again, it's these net additions at the end of the day that really create value in what we found here. And David knows, actually, Dan Mosier collected the information for us while he was at K-State, and then we actually turned this information over to a leading economist at the University of Missouri to put it into the simulation. I'm not sure the young lady's still here that presented yesterday about the data, but that simulation will be very interesting for you to take a look at and see what the long-term net effect would be to these Hereford sired calves and females in there. So we went down through there. We had advantages in weight, conception rate. Obviously, one of the key things that this group really liked was their advantage in disposition of those baldies. There was a slight advantage in feed conversion, but most importantly, not only did they get more females bred, but Circle A Ranch has 2 production sales a year selling purebred bulls and commercial females. And in the first year, the black baldy females outsold their straight blacks by $110 a head. So again, it's all about profitability and what you can do. We did genotype all the animals that went through the feedlot. We collected harvest data on all of them, got individual feed intake on every steer. And all of that data, as we go along here, just so you know, all of this data makes its way into our genetic evaluation to affect the EPDs of these bulls along with their parents and up and down and so on and so forth. So Dr. Vern Pierce, as I said, evaluated the economic of this. He put it in a 10-year model, and at the end of the day, after 10 years, and again, you got to remember when this was done. It was done about 12 years ago. He's seen that the net increase in value over 10 years for the life of a cow would be about $514. Again, $51 a year, that maybe isn't necessarily a huge number in your mind, but if you're running a lot of cows, that's a pretty significant number to take advantage of. Then we, again, really, Harris Ranch was our first one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the details here. You actually heard about it yesterday. The results were good. Again, at the end of the day, it was over 3 years. We had 297 Angus, 284 Hereford steers, As you seen yesterday, we had advantages in health, morbidity by the crossbred. We did not, we weren't as favorable for marbling as the Angus, and again, yet the overall net return just in the steers alone was $30. And I think this is kind of an interesting point to talk about, because what we did here in each one of these projects is we put a lot of emphasis, or we were able to collect a lot of data at the level of the feed yard. That black baldy steer, the animals that were in the feed yard. But remember the very first of our presentation, the real bang for your buck in these things over time is the effect of that crossbred cow. Because those lowly heritable traits are affected the most in terms of longevity and fertility. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind real well. The one thing, again, I guess I would touch on here in this particular project is it was a little different. These were natural sires that were covering cows right along Angus sires in the same pasture. All the calves were DNA'd, sire verified, and again, a couple of things that are pretty interesting from that. You might be surprised when you mass breed a set of cows with multiple bulls, how you like to think that it's evenly distributed, and it's not. There's some bulls, and I know, David, there's a lot of research at the Meat Animal Research Center looking at that and what the effect of that is. I think there's probably some real fertility talk in that area at some point in time, but we obviously had some bulls that did really, really well and some that did very poor. The good news is we got the cows bred. So at the end of the day, they asked us what kind of bulls, or somebody, again, I'll tell you about this set of bulls. These bulls were actually purchased by the American Hereford Association. And that was our commitment to Harris Ranch, that we would buy the bulls to put out there. And our budget was we had to find bulls that we could buy for $3,500 to $4,000. And we wanted to buy them in the area. And we didn't want to buy the elite herd bulls. What we wanted to do was buy the bulls that, if this project worked, that John and Mark Lacey could go out and actively find these kind of bulls in the price range that they could afford. So it didn't do us any good to go find the trait leader for every trait and put him out with those cows, and then at the end of the day, when Mark and John needed to buy those bulls, they couldn't afford them. So we found bulls in that $3,500 to $4,500 price range, and that's what we added in there. So where we are on these two projects, I'll tell you a little bit of where we are. We did these. The Harris Ranch was 3 years. We did we did Circle A for 3 years, and today, John and Mark Lacey are actively buying Hereford bulls, and over the last 2 years, they have mass bred their entire replacement heifer crop to Hereford bulls. So again, what we wanted to do was show the value of it, and then we wanted to let those guys take it and run with it if they could. And we talk a little bit, I talked earlier about the downside of coffee shop talk. What about the upside of coffee shop talk? When these guys are sitting around and visiting, and you look across the room and the guy that's your neighbor says, "What the hell are you doing running those Hereford bulls in there?" Well, because they work. And the next thing you know, it bleeds and it bleeds and it bleeds. And so our bull markets in these regions have actually seen significant increases. The same thing at Circle A, it worked. They began to go out and buy their own Hereford bulls. At Circle A now, they're totally commercial. And what they're doing is they're making black baldy females and they're turning Wagyu bulls with them. And then those calves go to their feed yard. And even last year, what they did is they worked with us and we found them female sex semen so that they could breed all of their heifers at Circle A to sexed female Hereford semen in order to increase, again, the black baldy population in their herd. That's what they're after.